I've never touched anything in the Metal Gear Solid series outside of the Phantom Pain. I loved its gameplay, but I couldn't follow the story very well, but that makes sense since it was the last entry in a series with a lot of entries. But when this remake of Snake Eater was announced, I was intrigued. Since it was a prequel, I figured the story would be easier to follow along with, and I also heard the boss encounters and the stealth gameplay were awesome, so I figured why not give it a shot. I'll be upfront right away and say I can't comment much on the quality of it as a remake, considering I never played the original game. But from what I can tell, it's diligent in maintaining the experience that came before. It adds a few quality of life improvements for those who want it, like a quick menu for the camouflage system, and a standard over-the-shoulder third-person viewpoint. However, if you don't want all the new stuff, they still offer up the original control scheme, which is great. That dedication is admirable, but without much in the way of major changes, I will say that the price tag of $70 is very easy to scrutinize. At least the game looks really good. So anyway, I guess overall, these are going to be my loose thoughts on Snake Eater itself rather than the remake. And after completing the game, my biggest takeaway is that I don't think it ever congeals into a cohesive experience despite its many triumphs. The story is strong at the very beginning and at the very end, but it feels like many of the middle portions are here to set up future events that have already taken place, given that this is the third game in the series, but a prequel to the first two. Meanwhile, the gameplay excels most during the middle portions of the game, when things open up. However, it remains pretty limited in the first and final hours. The opening is really strong. Snake is quickly established as being a badass when he leaps from the plane into the jungle below. And the way they blended actual history with fiction was enthralling, particularly how they leveraged the ending of the Cuban Missile Crisis by tying it to Sokolov's return to the Soviet homeland. The non-direct confrontations that define the Cold War make for a perfect backdrop for a stealth espionage game like this. The codec conversations are long, but all of them are worthwhile, offering up valuable tutorials while also establishing the most important relationship in this story, that between Snake and the boss. I love that the boss teaches Snake his final lesson, to always put your duty first, before forcing him to see it through to the end by the game's conclusion. The Virtuous mission also does a great job of introducing the player to the stealth sandbox and the intended gameplay loop. Hunting and the stamina bar is established in the room with the crocodiles. The importance of camouflage is made clear in this room with the different terrain types, and shooting down the hornet's nest shows us that there's room to experiment within the game. And then finally, the player gets tested on all of that when they reach the base where Sokolov is being held. And I love the little details of this game, like how killing Ocelot forces a game over, since canonically, that cannot happen. We then get to the boss's betrayal scene, which doesn't hit quite as hard as it could because we haven't gotten much time with her. However, what it does do is create mystery. After how hard she preached loyalty to the end, it raises suspicion of her motivations. Did she do us dirty, or is she still on our side? Time will tell. I think it makes for a very strong opening, but the next few hours couldn't quite keep me as interested as this first hour. Any scene that didn't involve the boss really had a hard time retaining my interest, whether that was with Volgin, Ocelot, Eva, or Granin. It felt like it was too desperate to be a spy thriller when Snake really isn't a spy. Despite his stealthy approach, Snake is a soldier, a fact that the boss herself really hammers home at the game's outset. The will they won't they relationship with Eva and the laughably evil villain with no redeeming qualities really don't leave much room for character depth. Ocelot is better owed to his motivation shifting, seeming to be more interested in Snake as a rival rather than as an enemy, so that wasn't bad, but still I had a hard time wrapping my mind around him without the context of the other games. As a result, during the middle portions, the strength of the gameplay is what carried me along. Stealth is the name of the game. Using proper camouflage, neutralizing enemies through body slams and well-placed headshots with the tranquilizer, and going prone carry the day. It's a relatively slow gameplay loop, especially with all the crawling, but I rather enjoyed it. There's plenty of opportunities to survey the scene and act after you've gathered information on how enemies patrol and how any room is structured. There isn't any X-ray vision mode to help you. No, you must simply act on your own accord and deal with the consequences as they come, using your tools as best as you can. And if you get caught, I loved having the option to simply replay the level from the beginning, using the information I had gleaned from the failed run to do better next time. Each level per se being its own contained room was great in this regard, because they sort of felt like miniaturized sized versions of levels from the recent Hitman trilogy. Instead of one massive sandbox to move through, you had tiny levels that were bite-sized, but easy to reset if you screwed up. I felt this stealth gameplay was best during the middle portions of the game. You're a little too limited in the opening hours, and after the torture scene, the game becomes a lot more action-focused in the finale. Since it's only 10 hours long, including the many cutscenes, this leaves only about half the experience to revolve around the strong stealth sandbox, which was disappointing. A second playthrough has really been enjoyable as a result. With the confidence of a completed run under my belt, I'm free to experiment more with wacky ideas, or to fail in spectacular fashion. And experimentation really is the best part of your toolkit, as there's so many tiny details and maneuvers that you can pull off that the game doesn't really make you aware of, you just have to figure it out for yourself. You know, it's that weird shit we really only see from Kojima. I'm talking about things like poisoning enemies by throwing rotting food at them only for them to snack on it. Or how your position can be given away owed to a rumble from Snake's stomach if you haven't fed him for a while. Or how you can throw trap snakes at an enemy so that they get bit and die from the poison. Or blowing up enemy warehouses and helicopters to limit their offensive capabilities. Or using the Rykov outfit to distract Volgin during that boss fight. There's just so many things like this that work if you had the curiosity to try it and see what happens. It's a testament to just how creative Kojima and his team were, and continue to be. It creates a really fun toolkit for the player to mess around with on subsequent runs, and I do think those New Game Plus playthroughs are what helps sell this game's price tag, although I still think it's too much. A lot has also been made about the boss encounters in Snake Eater, citing how creative they are. Well, here comes my hot take of this video. I don't think any of them are that great, at least on the normal difficulty. The pain was just that, a pain. After trekking through the dark cave and cheating by turning up the game's brightness, fighting this guy while constantly having to get in and out of the water was a drag. The fear was alright but relatively easy, and the fury was easily cheesed by hiding in the back of his room. Meanwhile, Volgin and the Shagohod don't utilize the stealth gameplay, making them decidedly the weakest. That leaves Ocelot, the End, the Sorrow, and the Boss as the only good bosses, but here's the catch, I was underwhelmed by them too. Ocelot's encounter was relatively lackluster. I expected another one later on, but never got it outside of this weird moment during the finale. The End fascinated me only in the fact that you could take him out before his intended boss fight by sniping him early, or by waiting long enough that he dies of old age. Kojima weirdness once again proving to be great. However, I fought him straight up, and it was nothing special. He was easy to spot, and went down without much resistance. I really don't get it. Either this fight was better in the original, or nostalgia has really boosted the fondness people speak about this encounter with. The Sorrow was okay, but too many YouTube videos talking about the most creative bosses in games really spoiled this fight for me. Still, it remains thematically strong, more so than any other boss fight except for the final one. The battle with the boss herself is an emotional high point, a great conclusion to the story, but it too left me underwhelmed, at least mechanically. You can parry her CQC moves, and that seems to be what the developers want you to do, but the timing is extremely tight, making it hard to pull off consistently. After practicing several times over, I still couldn't get it. so I ended up just sniping her in the head until the fight was over. I felt dirty for playing the fight out like this, but it felt like my only real option. Not to mention, headshotting bosses and seeing them walk it off over and over again also took me out of the experience. So overall, the bosses were actually a weak point in my mind. There you go, my hottest take on Snake Eater. They felt like distractions from the stealth sandbox gameplay that I was really enjoying, but felt like I was constantly being pulled away from, whether it was due to cutscenes, boss fights, or action sequences. By the end, I just wanted more of that particular gameplay, but I guess I'd just have to reinstall Phantom Pain to get it, and that's a shame. But again, this is a remake of a game that's over 20 years old, so I can't really blame it too much. They were faithful to the original, and the PlayStation 2 of the time limited what the team could do. So perhaps my expectations were a bit unfair. At least the story ends on a high note. The boss's betrayal builds up a lot of mystery, especially considering how often she seems to both help you and hurt you during the campaign. But the final fight provides the gut punch. You're forced to kill her, and only after do you learn that she never actually betrayed the United States. She was the fall guy, loyal to her country to the end, even though her service cost her everything. Her lover, her child, her relationship with Snake, and ultimately, her life. It's tragic and made me think about the internal struggle that career soldiers must feel, particularly the sacrifices they must make to fill their duty. It takes a true love of one's country to do so, and I think this game helped me appreciate that more. It all comes together to create a really resonant ending, especially seeing the usually calm, cool, and collected Snake have a breakdown over her gravestone. That was powerful. The game is full of cheesy moments and writing, but thematically it is really strong. That usually seems to be the case for Kojima, at least in the games that I've played. Anyway, I enjoyed my time with Metal Gear Solid Delta, and I've had a blast playing through it a second time while making this video. The story was good enough to hold my attention through most of the experience, and the stealth gameplay gets just enough time to shine to be worthwhile. This remake plays it close to the books, and I think many fans of the original will appreciate that in an era where remakes usually look to reinvent what came before and to take a lot of liberties. Truly though, I think it takes just that to warrant a purchase of this game. Fandom. If you weren't a Metal Gear Solid junkie, it's really hard to justify spending $70 on a game when the offering is pretty meager. If you can't see yourself playing through it at least twice, or engaging heavily with the other random add-on modes, then I'd wait for a sale. 40 to 50 bucks feels like the sweet spot. That's about it for me. I hope you enjoyed this quick look at Metal Gear Solid Delta. I was pretty torn on making a video about this game because, on one hand, I really liked the game and I wanted to talk about what worked and what didn't work for me, but at the same time, I also felt like I was underprepared to talk about it because I never played the original. In the end though, I felt the game did just enough to make me want to talk about it on the channel, despite the blind spots, so here we are. Still, I'm grateful for having played it. That freedom in the gameplay was a blast, I just wish it wasn't halted so often. And the story was mostly good, but certainly skippable on subsequent runs. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more, follow me on Twitter at NopNapNarp, donate if you want to using the links below, and as always, have a nice day, and take care.